staying with Eskom news, they're scrambling to source enough coal to feed one of the country's major power stations after a dispute with their supplier, Gupta-owned Tegeta Exploration and Resources. Leaked Eskom minutes published by the AmaBhungane Center for Investigative Journalism today revealed that Tegeta allegedly threatened to stop coal supplies unless the parastatal paid more per ton of coal. Tegeta is owned by the Gupta family, President Jacob Zuma's son Duduzane and Trillion founder Salim Essa. It sources coal from the Optimum coal mine. Now, Eskom in turn, according to the minutes of a meeting last Friday, threatened legal action against Tegeta. Eskom says coal stock at its Hendrina power station may be lower than the 20-day supply requirement, but that load shedding is not likely. Tegeta's attorney, Gert van der Merwe, says the company was supplying coal under strenuous conditions and if they were unable to make a profit, could be forced to cut supplies to the power station. AmaBhungane's story suggested that Tegeta may have been exporting coal from Optimum instead of supplying Eskom its full quota, placing the country's electricity supply under strain. Now, for more on the story, I'm joined by Susan Comrie from the AmaBhungane Center for Investigative Journalism. Thanks so much for your time on SABC News. You've been working on the Eskom Tegeta story. Give us some background and what's led to this point.
Well, I mean, this kind of came out of the blue, to be honest. I mean, I think a lot of people have been following what's been happening in Parliament with Eskom, but a lot of focus was taken off what was actually happening on the mine. Now, what happened sort of last week is that we got word that there was this demand that Tegeta had put in place to say to Eskom that they need to increase the price that they're paid for their coal. Now, that really seems to have come to a head last week on Friday, where you have these sort of dual crises unfolding at the same time at Eskom. On the one hand, you have Eskom discovering that their coal stocks are nowhere near the required 20 days, that they were dropping down to about 8 days of coal. And then at the same time, you have Tegeta saying that unless Eskom came to the party, that they were going to cut the conveyor belts at midnight, and that would stop supplying coal to Hendrina, which, as you've said, is a huge power station. It supplies 2,000 megawatts to the grid. And so that's really where things played out. Now, coal has continued being supplied. Eskom said that if Tegeta cut coal supply, they would go to court. They would get an urgent interdict to force Tegeta to keep supplying. But it's by no means over. Eskom is saying that, you know, the coal stocks are very low. They're having to truck in coal from other suppliers, even from other power stations. They're having to bring in coal. And they're now launching an investigation to find out what has gone so horribly wrong that they are being left with short of coal, and why Tegeta hasn't been living up to their contractual obligations for the past 6 months at least.
What are the implications if this leaked memo is obviously true? I'm assuming you've verified that it is definitely coming from Eskom, that is the thing. What are the implications for us as South Africans and our power supply if the coal either stops being produced or the coal reserves are at that 8-day that you're talking about instead of the at least 20 days?
Sure. Well, I mean, there's a kind of local effect, and then there's a bigger picture effect. The local effect, you know, there's a chance that Hendrina might not have enough coal and that they will have to switch off that power station. Now, at the moment, Hendrina is running at a sort of lower capacity, so we lose about 900 megawatts from the grid. Now, Eskom is saying that that could result in the open cycle gas turbines being switched on and us being forced to run those very expensive, diesel-powered gas turbines. There is a chance, Eskom says, that long term within the next few months, that this could actually put the entire system under threat of load shedding. Now, the bigger picture that we have to look at here, and what Eskom is saying that they are now investigating, is how did this miscalculation happen? And is it only the Hendrina power station that's affected? Or potentially, are we going to see the same miscalculation at other power stations? And hence, we might discover that some of the other power stations are also quite critically low of coal.
Susan, can you just explain to me, it's been alleged that Tegeta has been exporting, and I'm quoting, coal from Optimum mine while at the same time starving Eskom of the coal that it's legally entitled to. What does this mean? How does this play out in simpler terms?
Well, I mean, what we are hearing from people on the ground is that a large amount of coal is being exported. Now, in terms of the contract, that mine is required to give the Hendrina power station 458,000 tons of coal every single month. Now, if they have additional coal on top of that, then they're welcome to export it, but they have to fulfill that contractual obligation to Eskom. If they don't, it means that Eskom has to then truck in coal from other places, which is much more expensive, A, because the price of coal that they're going to be able to get on the open market and in an emergency situation is going to be higher, but then also they're going to have to pay the transport costs. So, I mean, the implication is huge if they have been doing that. We are hoping that at some point they'll come to the party and will be sort of willing to talk about what is actually happening on the mine from their perspective.
You're speaking about Tegeta now. Yes. Just to note that we've also tried to reach out to Tegeta for some comment on these allegations and are still waiting for a response. What has Eskom said to you on this issue?
Well, Eskom has been surprisingly forthcoming. We put quite detailed questions to Eskom on Tuesday afternoon, and they came back to us yesterday afternoon, and they said, yes, basically what you are saying is true. They've given a detailed statement. They've made that available on Twitter, and we've retweeted that. But they are saying that, yes, there is a problem with the coal supplies at Hendrina. And one of the interesting things that they're saying is that this problem of there not being enough coal at Hendrina has been massively exacerbated by Tegeta not delivering all of the coal that they're contractually obliged to deliver. The interesting thing in there is that we're seeing Eskom starting to kind of take quite a sort of no-nonsense approach. Eskom is saying, we'll get an interdict if you threaten to cut the coal supply. They're saying they will pursue Tegeta in the courts for the penalties that they're legally entitled to. So definitely a new perspective from Eskom.
How much further can you take the story? Is this where you leave it, or are you going to investigate further and try and see what else comes up?
Well, there's a lot more in the leaked minutes, and a lot of that goes into the bigger questions around the coal supply and the system. Now, they seem to be suggesting in those minutes that things are a lot tighter than we've been led to believe, that, you know, perhaps we don't have this excess supply. The problem is, of course, that we know that Eskom is also trying to get quite a substantial price increase from NERSA. So I think one has to tread quite carefully with those allegations and really, you know, investigate a bit further before I think we can sort of make any conclusive claims about what's actually happening with the power system. But it certainly does seem to be not just isolated to this one power station and this one mine. This is a crisis that's unfolding there. But they are sort of worried, it seems, from those minutes about the broader picture of the power supply.
Susan Comrie from AmaBhungane, thanks so much for your time on SABC News.